Thank you all. I had a chance to pop around from room to room. Again, mentors, thank you for leading the discussion. The point, and I'll just pick up where I left off during the introduction. The point is, veterans, companies want to hire you for the values you can bring to them. You have, based on your military experience, enormous values, whether it's integrity, as I heard some of the groups talking about, selfless service, others were talking about, whatever the values that commitment, courage, whatever values that you developed and inculcated to such a strong degree, the more you can talk about them, the more you're going to make yourself appealing to an HR recruiter who is looking for somebody who can bring the values to them. So you've got them. The key is just to be able to go in like a miner, go and get them out and then bring them forward. And very often we hear from the vets, well, I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, or I don't want to talk too much about myself. Put a big X through that, because the key in an interview, and I want you to take everything that we're doing today and use this in your interviews. The key in your interview is to get that person to say yes to you. And the way that person's going to say yes is if they can see that you can express something that they need. And companies need people with strong values. So what I'd like to hear from some of our mentors is, in your discussions, you heard vets talking about values that they had. I'll just give you one example in one of the groups, and I don't know if Peter Watkins might want to chip in here. As I was listening, you were talking about, being in charge of supply chain, and that was a leadership role for you. And one of the values that you inculcated was initiative, taking initiative. What I'd like to do, Peter, and you
Sure.
talked about it in your small group, but for the benefit of the full group, if you could just share, again, how initiative was such a strong value that you developed in the military, became such a strong part of you from your military service that it's central to you now, and just share what you talked about in your small group for the benefit of the full group. Then before we go on to the next breakout session around skills, I'd like some of our mentors, after Peter chips in and represents everybody talking about his value, but do this, Peter, representing everybody. I'd like to hear some of the mentors affirm that the values that you heard the vets talk about are attractive to you and can give somebody an edge to get hired at your company. So Peter, not to put you on the spot.
No worries.
That's what I'm doing, I guess. Take it over from here and just recap for us what you talked about in terms of initiative.
Absolutely. So in our small breakout sessions, we were talking about skill assets that we learned while we were leaders in the military. For me, as a small unit leader, as most of us were, I was an NCO working for the 31st MU Humanitarian Aid Assistance division of that MU. And initiative was a lot of what I learned. Hopefully my boss, Mr. Butler, will be able to attest to the fact that I could take initiative sometimes. But when it comes to being hired, I imagine that's one of the most important things, an individual thinker that could take charge on their own and be able to either address an issue that they're having at work, or take spearhead on a point on a position for a project that you're all working on. For me, having self-sustained motivation to do something that a lot of people are not willing to do or afraid to do is extremely important as a leader and as a veteran in the workplace. We are looked at in much different ways than our civilian counterparts when we were put into a job. And initiative is a lot of that, having the confidence and the belief in yourself that you can make a choice decision to lead everybody else to victory, whether it's in the workplace, on the battlefield.
Yeah, and Peter, how old were you when you were in the military?
I signed up when I was 22 years old. So my first unit, within the first 2 weeks of me arriving at my first unit, I was 23 at the time, actually. So that was August. I was 23, taking initiative as like a young Lance Corporal.
And let me just stop you there, because as I mentioned, 1,500 vets have been through Edge4Vets so far in 9 years. And I ask you that question because it's one that I hear repeatedly from vets. You have enormous responsibility. You did have enormous responsibility in the military, but you had this responsibility at a very young age. And so you you were 22, 23, 24, carrying out this initiative, as you said, you know, taking charge, making things happen. And what I'd love to hear is some of the companies affirm for us that somebody who can bring that kind of value to your company is something, number one, that your company values, but then also can give them an edge when they're interviewing for you. Any of our mentors want to jump in and take that before we go on to the next section on skills?
Hey, it's Gus Wong from Macquarie here. Tom, I really echo that. I think it's really, something that vets should be really proud of and feel confident to showcase the values that they bring. What we heard around leadership and the ability to make decisions, even at a young age, that is something that we prize and value and covet as a competency in our organization, which is in finance. And just to piggyback off, our breakout session, we heard from Aaron, who had spent some time in the infantry, and I was really impressed with the single-minded focus on excellence. That is something that it's very hard to teach. It is a value to strive for excellence, and he used a quote here, which is about real life consequences. There's no second place in a firefight. And while we might not have those life or death type situations in the financial world, it is competitive, and we value someone who comes in with that inner drive. We also heard from our vet, Chris, who was talking about adaptability and teamwork. And that's something that really is a competency that we really value in our organization. Thank you, Tom.
Wonderful. Let me just recap that, Gus, what you're talking about, summarizing a couple of things, I'm sure was true in all four of the breakout sessions. So that's, you see, I just want to underscore for you the point in all of this. What we're looking to do with these breakout sessions is give you a chance to get support from our mentors to answer, and you see it on the screen there, that question. What values did you inculcate in the military that guide you today? You might just think, oh, well, nobody wants to hear about that. Wrong. If you can go into an interview, identify values as Gus just described that he heard in his session from some of the vets, go into an interview and talk about that in your own language, you will be setting yourself up with an edge that's going to get that interviewer to lean forward and pay attention to you. And that's what you want in an interview. You want that edge that's going to distinguish you. Our point is that you've got that edge. You've got that edge already. You've got an asset, and the asset breaks down into the values you develop and the skills that you develop. You have that. It's, you don't have to have been in the military to have values and skills. However, because you're in the military, there's a very strong chance you have a great quantity of values and a great quantity of skills that when you can talk about them in your own terms, based on your experience, you're going to get an interviewer to lean forward and pay attention to you. And that's our goal in all of this, to give you put the cards in your hand so that you can sell yourself. So that was part one, the values you developed. And I hope that you were able to, whether you jotted it down in person or, made some mental notes. When you take the online course, we're going to take you through this process again, and you're going to have a chance to type in a space your values statement, and then you move to the next one, the skill statement. And when you type in these answers and go through the process, you'll hit submit at the end, and out will come a really nice, well-crafted, attractive plan for success that becomes your card to sell yourself. So with that as the introduction to the next breakout session, and Steve will send folks there in a moment, what I'd like to do is to tee up the next conversation for breakout number 2 around skills. Is vets, what I'm going to ask you, you got practice in the first session. Steve's going to give you your groups 15 minutes again to give each vet a chance to talk about whatever your MOS was, what were your duties? That's what I'd like you to identify. What duties did you have, and what did you get good at carrying out those duties? I think, Peter, your thing about the supply chain and all was your duty. You can pick up on that point. I encourage others to pick up on their values piece to talk about next what you got good at in a technical way or an intangible way in carrying out your duties, because that's going to be your skill set. That's going to be your skill set that is transferable to the civilian sector. And mentors, again, I'm going to ask you to listen and affirm as the vets talk about what they got good at. Affirm for them that this has value to your company and therefore can give them an edge when it comes to securing a job.
Tom,
So,
before we go there, can I make just one quick point?
yes.
Something that I heard that I hear from a lot of veterans is that they talk about values that are like over and above what all of is kind of like a standard value that every service member has to have. And they kind of take for granted those standard set of core values, if you will, and don't give them the merit that they deserve when they talk about the values that they have. They're talking about, I want to be the most competitive, I want to be the best, and they've got to do they got to have all those values underneath that makes them a cut above everybody else in a very competitive environment.
Excellent point, Matt. And I think a good lead into our next discussion on skills. And before, Steve, you send folks, what I'd like to do is tee up the discussion for the skills small group with this video.
Imagine this, an interviewer asks you about your skills and you say, my MOS was AMS. I graduated in the top 5% in the military school, including PLDC. I represented my unit at the NCO boards, throwing in every bit of jargon you can muster, and you get this. That's the look of a mile-wide gap opening between you and the dream job you've been working so hard to land. But all is not lost. In this video, we'll show you how to do what business leaders say you need to do most, and that is translate your military skills into language for the civilian workplace. Here's a comment from a business leader at McKinsey. Companies want strong change leaders, people who can lead by example. But there's one problem for companies. How do we find leaders with these skills? You can be the answer to that question, but you have to show companies that you have the skills that they need. There are 3 steps to translate your military skills into tools for civilian success. First, identify duties you had in the military. You had many, but list 3 that stand out. For example, if your MOS, as shown above, was AMS, Aviation Maintenance Service, your duties might have included 1, keeping meticulous records, 2, amassing knowledge, 3, reporting on a regular basis. Next, list 3 things you got good at in a technical way as you carried out your duties. You might say 1, highly organized, 2, data collection, 3, sharp analysis. In addition to technical skills, you developed intangible skills, and you want to talk about them as well. We work with 4 intangible skills in Edge4Vets called resiliency strengths. They are adaptability, engagement, optimism, and proaction. We'll ask you to list ways you got good at being resilient. For example, you might say, adaptable, I learned how to adjust on the spot. Engagement, team player. Optimism, keeping myself up. Proaction, when I saw a problem, I acted. Again, we give you a worksheet to record your experiences and break out your own technical and intangible skills to create a skills statement. Once you do that, you will put another ace in your hand. Your skills statement is your ace of clubs. With each step, you're upping your chances to ace your interview. And that's our goal.
Okay, great. So Steve, I'm going to let you break everybody into sessions again. 15 minutes, folks. Vets, this is what we want you to talk about. And mentors, keep the vets focused on this, answering this question. What were your duties and what did you get good at? And just get comfortable talking. And again, please don't feel that it's like, oh, bragging, or as Matt says, everybody, this is not, extraordinary because I thought everybody. No, if you got good at something, talk about it and develop that confidence just using your own language to talk about what you got good at. And mentors encourage them to do this. And then we'll come back and recap as a full group.
Sure. Thanks, Tom. And real quick, before I open up the next session, just curious, but if there's any Coasties in here, send a little Semper P my way in the chat box. I know we can be, as rare as unicorn in these types of events, but I know I'm bound to see at least someone from the Coast Guard one of these days. That's my little plug. But besides that, so I changed up the rooms a little bit this time, just to switch it around, meet new people. So I'll open it up with the same 15-minute timer. Same rules apply. It'll bring you back in the main session right after.